everyone. Today's episode is all about love. Love for ourselves, love for others, and how we express our love in different ways. I hope you'll discover along with me that, as my favorite line in Love Actually says, love really is all around. So let's dive in. I've experimented with expressing love in new ways and had some really neat results. Growing up, we were never a family that said I love yous. Not out loud to each other anyway. I never thought too much about it then. I knew I was loved by my parents, and I never questioned that. But I would hear my friends freely exchange I love yous with their parents and think, I wonder why we don't do that. So I thought I'd try it out and see how it went. I was so uncertain and afraid of what the response might be that when I went to do it, I choked. I choked on the words and I couldn't get them out, and I just defaulted to my usual hug and kiss when my parents said goodnight to me and carried on. Weird, right? Well, as it turns out, not really so weird. You see, everyone has a primary way that they share their love most easily. And while not everyone agrees with the identification of the 5 languages of love, I find them a really great basis for learning about how people give and receive love. I read Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Languages of Love, about 10 years ago. I'd been working for about a year after finishing university and was living back at home with Mom and Dad, soon to be moving to Ottawa for my job. Love had started to become more on my radar. I think I attended 5 weddings that summer and 7 the following summer. At the time, I think I'd hoped the book would help steer me towards how to find that romantic love in my life that I was missing. Well, what I ended up taking away from the book was much more valuable. In the 5 languages of love, Gary introduces 5 different ways people give and receive love. 1, acts of service. 2, physical touch. 3, receiving gifts. 4, quality time. And 5, words of affirmation. So I'll repeat them one more time for you because I know that's a lot to take in. But acts of service, physical touch, receiving gifts, quality time, and words of affirmation. And I want you to take a minute and think about yourself and how you like to give and receive love. What do you think your primary language is? If you're uncertain, the book has a little quiz you can take to figure that out, and there's an online version as well you can do. I knew pretty quickly for me that mine was physical touch. I'm a hugger. I've always been a hugger, probably always will be a hugger. And I'm losing my train of thought because I got so excited about my hugging. But I feel loved when someone reciprocates a hug that I'm giving or initiates a hug with me. And while that's great to know, it's not as important as knowing how others' love languages are, what others' love languages are. And what's neat about the book is that it really forces you to think about how those around you give and receive love. And not just your partner, romantically, but family members, friends, coworkers, anybody that you interact with, really. Because the love goes far beyond just romantic love. It was pretty clear to me that my family's wasn't words of affirmation. But both my parents absolutely are acts of service, and my dad in particular shares the physical touch language similar to me. As Reverend Mark pointed out in the service, taking another's point of view on love, and in this case, on how they give and receive love, is the key to success with the love languages. Knowing your own is neat, but won't necessarily help you connect better with other people. So with this in mind, I started to reflect on my own behavior and experience with my immediate family. Being fiercely independent and not one who likes to ask for help or accept help very well, I came to realize that I was actually pushing away the love that those closest to me were trying to show by refusing to take their acts of service or gifts. I had to learn to be a generous receiver of their love, which came through those acts. While not what I was really comfortable with, I knew I could do it. I started with little things. When my dad offered to take my car to get service before I moved away that year, I said yes and let him. knowing it would make me uncomfortable to know he was paying for it and doing it, but recognizing that this was one way he was showing me that he cared about me and that he was going to miss me when I moved. I learned how to say thank you for these acts rather than responding with, "You didn't need to do that." I recognize now how that must have made the other person feel, that I didn't really care that they were showing me love. I also work to be mindful of my own affinity to physical touch by not immediately assuming that people wanted my hugs and that perhaps forcing them on other people wouldn't exactly translate into feelings of them feeling loved, but rather maybe just make them feel uncomfortable. As I continued to experiment, I learned a lot and gained even more as my relationships with others became stronger. So going back to the words of affirmation, or in my case, the I love yous, that I still felt were lacking in my life, I decided to try one final experiment. I'd read about this idea in the book, so I can't claim it as my own, but the gist of it is there was a young woman similar to me, and that her family didn't express their love using words. And she decided to see what would happen if she started telling her family members she loved them. I thought this was a great idea. As I'd mentioned, I tried before to get the words out, but continued to choke on them, and maybe I could try again. By this point, I'd nicely settled into Ottawa and communicated mainly by phone with my family. Grandma and I spoke a couple of times a week, and it was her who I decided to share my first I love you with. I was not successful the first time. Hanging up the phone, I hung up before I could get the words out. I stopped myself again, and I was kicking myself afterwards because I knew it would be another few days before I could try this experiment again. So the next time I was ready. I don't think I remember a word of that conversation because I was so focused on the ending and how I would say I love you before hanging up. I honestly don't know what was said, but I did manage to get out "I love you" before I hung up the phone. I don't think I will ever know if she was going to say it back because I hung up so quickly after saying it that I don't think she would have had time to respond if she wanted to. But I was very happy I'd taken the first step. The next phone call, it was easier, and I said it again before hanging up. Grandma didn't say it back that time, just said her usual, "Bye, dear." However, I kept at it, and by about the 5th time, I got my first "I love you too" before we hung up. My smile was so big that day you couldn't have brought me down if you tried. It had worked. I had broken the barrier, and for the past 10 years since that moment, Grandma and I rarely ever leave each other's company or a phone call without an exchange of "I love you." But what makes us so afraid to share our love? I think for me at least, the fear of rejection was so great that it held me back. As I think more about it, what have I got to lose? If the person doesn't know I love them, I'm no better off than if I tell them and they don't reciprocate. If I never tell them, I'll never know. I'm still working on being completely open about my love with my family, but "I love yous" definitely flow much more freely from my mouth these days, and my pen, and I'm comfortable in knowing that I may not hear it back, but that doesn't mean the person doesn't love me. It's just how they're comfortable sharing their love. Or maybe they don't love me, and that's okay too. The Bible is full of love. It's evident in parts like the birth of Jesus, but as I've come to discover through a quick Google search, the word love actually appears in the Bible 232 times in the New Testament and over 300 times in the Old Testament. Love is all around. In many parts of the Bible, love is spoken of as a sacrifice. God so loved the world that he gave them his only son. In other parts, it speaks of love as obedience. "If you love me, you will keep my commandments," it says in John 14. And of course, there are many parts of the Bible where love emphasizes the importance of loving thy neighbor, thyself, and even thy enemies. To love your enemies is not easy, but the reward of being that bigger person and rising above others' behaviors and actions is very worth it. Don't waste your time on hate. Use that energy for love. I think my favorite piece about love in the Bible is that love is unselfish. as many of you can recite with me from Corinthians 9. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Love never fails. I think that last line, love never fails, is the most important piece. Love is not about passing or failing. It's not a measure of your success. Love isn't about perfection. It's not something that has to be done a certain way. Love is a feeling inside. And to have love in you means you've already won. What you choose to do with that love is up to you. But there's no right or wrong. So, my friends, know that you are loved and that you can share that love freely with those around you. Because as you know, love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something if you give it away, you'll end up having more. Bye for now.